thank you to the AV guy. And thanks for having me here today. It's a real honor to be in this hallowed ground of MedTech development. I've been impressed with everyone I've met with these past 2 days, but just walking up and down the halls of the Bachman Center here, it's just been amazing. So thank you all for your hospitality. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the UK medtech sector and some of the analysis that we've been doing as part of my work in the Center for Sectoral Economic Performance at Imperial. And then I'm going to tell you a bit about one of my ventures, the one I'm working the most on these days. And then that'll sort of segue into me complaining about not getting funded. And then, but please, at any point in this talk, I don't have very many slides, so we're not going to, it's not going to, the slides themselves are not going to take the whole time. What I hope is that you'll interrupt me with questions during all of this. And then that will allow me to patch some of the holes that I have undoubtedly left out of this story. So, I'm professor of bioengineering at Imperial. So I run a research group. I teach. I develop these devices. One of the things I teach is medical device entrepreneurship, as you mentioned, and so that's I'm like a regular academic and an engineer, very much an engineer. And then a few years ago, I got asked by my dean to participate in some economic studies of UK tech sectors, and the reason he asked me was to do something on the medtech sector in the UK. So the way this all came about is Lord David Sainsbury, who's mentioned who's shown in the picture here. If you've ever been to the UK, you've probably shopped at a Sainsbury's grocery store, right? And so this is his grandfather or great grandfather started this grocery. Literally the embodiment of a high net worth individual. So he came to Imperial. He's a former PM, not prime minister. He's former minister, and in the government, very involved in the Labour government. And he came to Imperial and he said, "Look, the productivity is going down in the UK. Our GVA per employee is going down, gross value added to the economy, which is the thing that if you sum gross value added up for all the companies in a country, you get GDP, right? So he said, these things are not going in the right direction. We need to look at certain high tech sectors where intellectual property is important, or there's some high value added manufacturing involved, and so forth. And so medtech fits his interest area pretty well. And he wanted Imperial. He came to Imperial because we have a business school and the top engineering school, and he wanted us to work together to do these quantitative analyses of these high tech sectors and figure out what we can do to make them more productive and really sort of save the UK economy from the horrors of Brexit and all the other self-inflicted wounds of the last few years. So and so you can see kind of an outline of what he had in mind here. And he's such a nice guy. He's great. He's super smart. He's in his 80s, but he's still sharp as a tack and a really impressive individual. It's been a pleasure to work with him. So what do we do? Well, we started out doing sector analyses of biopharma, medtech, and telecoms. And this is all during pandemic, all working virtually. And then we have since branched out into some other areas that you can see listed here, which have been fun for me to learn about as well as stuff a bit outside my own area. We do strategy plans. And really, in terms of doing an analysis of a sector and doing the strategy plan, MedTech has sort of led the way. We were one of the first three areas where the analysis was done, and then we've since done the strategy document as well. And I'll show you a bit more about that in a moment. So the other sectors some of them, the analysis is just being done. Some of them, the analysis wasn't quite complete the first time, so they're having to go back and do some additional stuff. So really, the MedTech has kind of led the way in the center, which I'm very proud of. But it also means that I don't have a precedent to follow in generating these reports, and I'm not an economist, so it's really, I've had to learn a lot and on the fly very much. So and then we also host events like boot camps for civil servants, people whose jobs are to determine government policies that greatly influence the success of a technical sector. And a good example of that is the regulatory environment. So imagine the people that determine the rules for the FDA if they knew absolutely nothing about biopharma or medtech. And we're trying to prevent that. So the MHRA is the relevant governing body in the UK. The short version of the story is we were aligned with the European system of regulating medtech, which was MDD, Medical Device Directives. And just about the time Brexit was happening, EU was transitioning to MDR, right? Which you're probably familiar. I see a lot of people nodding. It's a much more stringent system and a quite different system. There's a lot of unknowns, and people are really the industry is just kind of struggling with it a bit. I think it's getting better, but it was a problem. And so the UK did this thing where they decided, well, we're just going to stick with the MDD. And we looked at that and said, no, that's idiotic. Actually, we're only 3% of the worldwide medtech market. And if Medtronic or J&J or Boston Scientific have to go through a completely different regulatory system, guess what? They're just not going to bother with us, and they'll be pulling products off the shelves of the National Health Service. And that would not be good. So we actually have done a lot of work with civil servants to try and implement a system that makes more sense. And I think they're finally saying officially, yes, we're going to recognize FDA. Yes, we're going to recognize MDR. And if we do something custom within the UK, it'll be fine. It'll be, maybe we could do things like encourage clinical trials there. Maybe we can, maybe there's some nice creative things we can do. And ideally, that's what we'll end up with. But that's it gives you an example of why we're trying to interface with civil servants, because it's, in a highly regulated sector, this is what you need to do. We fund PhD students, and we have, a variety of other events as well. So these are the two reports that I've generated in collaboration with other people, certainly. So on the left is the first one is the sector economic analysis. And I'll show you a few sentences, like 50 plots in this thing. I'm not going to show them all. I'll show a couple. And the second one is the sector strategy document, which was done in collaboration with ABHI. That's the Association of British Health Tech Industries. It's the British equivalent of AdvoMed, right? So it's the the industry organ. It's the professional organization. And so the first one was co-authored by a research assistant that worked with me to gather the data and process the data. And again, the second one was with ABHI. Now, one of the things that was really interesting about this, the results of the analysis is because we did a biopharma report at the same time, we had very comparable data in terms of the contribution of these two different sectors to the UK economy. So biopharma in the UK is massive, right? We got GSK, we got AstraZeneca. These are two leading companies, worldwide leading companies. Can anyone name a leading UK medtech company?
Smith and Nephew.
Smith and Nephew, number 22 in the world in terms of medtech companies. So it's about medium size, right? Can you name another one? No, I didn't think so. Yeah.
Convatec.
Convatec, very good. Very good. Wound care. Both. Yeah. Teacher's pet in the background. Well, thank you for answering. So those are great answers. So those are probably the two largest medtech companies, but they're nowhere near the size of GSK or AZ, right? AZ, sorry, I should speak American here. And so we compared the economic contribution of these two sectors side by side, actually, and lo and behold, MedTech contributes as much to the UK economy as biopharma does. And everyone I talk to in the UK about this is surprised by these numbers. I was surprised by these numbers too. I didn't think it'd be within an order of magnitude. So GVA is gross value added. Again, it's what you sum up amongst all the companies and sectors to get GDP. And yes, it's sales. Yeah, yeah. And you can see we employ more people, and we have a better growth rate. So two massive companies grow; they grow at 3% a year, right? That's not going to change. This is a nice number. I think it could be bigger, right? This is great. So we may already be bigger than biopharma in the UK, and this is completely the long tail effect, right? So biopharma has the two massive companies and a bunch of startups that really don't contribute that much to the economy, right? MedTech is a few thousand companies, a lot of whom are already on the market. They're selling in the UK, they're selling in Europe. Some of them are selling in the US, not as many as we would like. And so you get that long tail effect, and it really makes a difference. It's so I've been showing this slide and showing this slide, showing it again and again and again to show people how important MedTech is to the UK economy. Yes.
It's very good learning here. Thank you for that. And for the medtech industry, though, is it pretty distributed across UK, or is there where are the centers of London? I assume.
Yeah, so Smith and Nephew is based kind of in the north.
Yeah.
Of course, they have an important office in London. Convatec is southwest of London.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they tend to be in the university areas, which means they're really scattered all around.
Yeah.
And that's actually, it's a big political point in the UK that whatever, like the banking industry.
Yeah.
Is pretty much all in London, and the people up north get irritated that it's such a big deal because they really don't benefit from it at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the fact that MedTech is spread throughout the country is actually another good feather in our cap.
Yeah.
So, there's certainly, we call it the Golden Triangle, Oxford, Cambridge, London. There's a lot in that region for sure. Can't deny that. But I believe Smith and Nephew is based up in Yorkshire, around York, Leeds.
In Hull.
Sorry?
Hull. Which is a fishing shipping town.
Yeah. It's even further north. So yeah.
But all the lawyers and smart people work in York.
Yeah. There you go.
He's the ringer in the back.
Yeah. I
Billy, he's from York.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm from even further.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I like the accent. Good job. So I should take you around to all my presentations. But
You brought him along.
Yeah. But also around Manchester, there's a lot around Newcastle, which is even further north, and then Hull, and even up into Scotland, there's quite a bit, and Northern Ireland actually does well, which is part of the UK. So that they're good at MedTech as well. Wales, it's really scattered all over the country. So thanks for asking that question.
Hey, Jimmy, before you leave the slide,
Yeah.
when you are talking, I presume you also present this to PhD students, right, and younger people that are thinking about going into MedTech?
Yeah.
So how do you pitch this slide and make them understand that that this is a great opportunity for them, looking at the turnover, for instance? Or do you not look at the turnover and you focus on?
I think the bioengineering students probably don't need any more convincing that, if they want to do MedTech, they probably already decided that. I think it's more useful. It's very useful for medical students to see, because there's just sort of this national default conception that biopharma is massive and MedTech is peanuts, and so I think it's useful for the medical students to see that, and And we have 2 different degree programs for medical students to come and spend a year in bioengineering. And, what they always come away with, wow, I had no idea what was involved in engineering and making medical devices, and they have a newfound respect for it. And this would be certainly part of that message for sure. Yeah. So here's some data. So what sorts of companies do we have? Well, the 2 biggest contributors to the GVA in the UK are consultant houses. We have a lot of those. They'll help you, they'll have their quality management system already set up. They'll generate prototypes for you and designs and documentation and the whole bit. And then you fold them into your QMS as you go forward. And so it's great for startups that there are these really, really impressive, very well-equipped and very smart consultants available. Legal manufacturer, I assume everybody knows what that means. So that's the holder of the IP generally. So it would be like my company that is creating the device, but maybe it's we get some early prototyping done by these people. And so those are the 2 biggest contributors. And I think that's great, right? That we have the legal manufacturers are one of the leading contributors to GVA. So we like that a lot. And amongst that, as is noted over there, is many university spinouts. And so that was another thing that I found as part of doing this report is the following. So this was a table that was presented in a report by the Royal Academy of Engineering. They have categorized the types of university spinouts created in the UK. And what's number 1? Pharmaceuticals. But I looked closer at this thing and I said, well, hang on. That's MedTech, right? And this is really representative of the sort of lack of respect that the sector gets in the UK is, even the people that crunch the numbers in the government and in the learned societies don't recognize, the importance of MedTech and even treat it appropriately. And that adds up to 284. It's about the same number. So we are creating as many university spinouts as biopharma in the UK. And we're doing it on much less research funding. So biopharma research funding comes from the equivalent of NIH as the Medical Research Council. It's actually pretty small. The Wellcome Trust, which is huge. Some of you may have had funding from them. They fund all over the world. Cancer Research UK is big, and British Heart Foundation is huge, right? That's a lot of funding out of those 4 organizations. For bioengineering, we get research from the equivalent of NSF. It's called the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. And we get a bit from, there's a branch of the NHS that supports research, and they tend to focus on MedTech. It's peanuts. You can throw it in the equation, but it's the funding base for biopharma is 15 times the size of the funding base for bioengineering, and we are producing as many university spinouts. It's great, right? Except if we're presenting this to the people with the purse strings in government, they'll say, okay, you're doing great. You don't need much money. Thanks for telling us, right? So, but I think it's, it's a great, again, a great indicator for the sector. So following all that data gathering, again, we wrote this strategy report. And so the UK is really good at the government producing policies that industry should follow for the sector to grow. They're really good at producing those reports. Those reports are horrible at actually producing any growth. So these top-down initiatives that come down from government tend not to work. Really, if you want to know what the sector needs, ask the sector, right? And so if you ask ABHI, if you ask the companies, they'll tell you things that are going to increase their bottom line. And I think that's important to point out, because this is the role that CSEP can play, the Center for Sectoral Economic Performance, is that we bring in academic research rigor and neutrality to to this. And, we can work with AVHI to produce this report, but we're not just going to parrot AVHI's talking points. We're going to really kind of look at it with a more balanced point of view. And that's what we've done. And so we've created this bottom-up strategy with industry stakeholders, most of whom we know through AVHI, but also startups, the early stage companies and university spin-offs and the whole bit. And so this is really kind of, written by the sector for the sector, or by industry for industry. And we sort of got some short-term wins, medium-term and long-term wins. And I'll give you a QR code. You can download both of these reports in a moment. And so you may have seen it in the news. It's at least been in the New York Times about how the NHS is really in sad shape these days. And that is true as someone who depends on the NHS for healthcare. I can tell you it's terrible. I can't get an appointment with my GP. Period. Like it's almost to the point where you got to go to the emergency room if you want to see a medic these days, and that's not a great system to have.
Jimmy, just
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that know how the healthcare system works in other countries. In the US, we do have plans where you can go as much as you want and you pay a small copay.
Yeah.
Other programs are trying to optimize this by allowing you to save money and only go when you really need to go, and that money can be reinvested. And so you kind of have different options in UK. Can you just explain and I lived in Germany, so I know German style, and I lived in Ireland, so Ireland, but UK.
Yeah,
share with us
so-
how healthcare works.
Yeah, the UK would be maybe a bit more like Ireland than
Yeah.
Germany. So it's a single payer system. So it's the government runs, the government is the payer, the government is the provider. GPs are slightly kind of hybrid, but they're essentially just part of the NHS as well.
But you can go, whenever you have a problem, you can just try, or you can't get an appointment, you could make as many appointments as you want. Or is there some kind of
No, there's a
number of-
very tight screening process.
Okay, yeah.
The GPs are there as defense.
Yeah,
They're there to defend the NHS against people coming in. It's the way it works, right? So it's if you need a referral, you got to really convince your GP that you got a serious problem. And for example, if a woman wants to see a gynecologist, that's almost never going to happen. Because the GP will handle everything.
and you can't even get appointments for GP even.
Right. Yeah. It's really difficult these days. Yeah. So it's a real shame. There is private healthcare in the UK, but it's a very small number of people. It's typically the bankers will provide private health insurance for their employees. So it's kind of the top crust of society gets access to private healthcare.
I see.
Yeah. So but it's and Lord Darcy is actually, he's a surgeon. He works at Imperial College as well. Works well with bioengineers, so he's worked a lot with my department. He wrote a review of the NHS a few months ago saying, look, this is terrible. It's been started funding by the Tories for the years that they were in power, and Labour hasn't done much to increase that since they came to power. So if we're going to get NHS off life support, MedTech is going to be absolutely crucial. And he said this over and over and over in his report. So good for the sector. But how do we implement all of that? And that's not easy to do in something the size of the NHS. So another quiz for you. Does anyone know who's the largest employer on the planet?
People's Liberation Army.
Very good. Chinese Army. Second.
I was gonna think of a religious group, but
Indian Railways.
Oh,
Second.
sure.
Third, NHS, third largest employer on the planet. This is a massive organization. It's difficult to get anything implemented, right? So this is really going to be a huge challenge to turn this massive oil tanker in the right direction and implement technologies within the system to do that. So you can see some of the challenges we have ahead of us, but some of us like challenges. All right, so here's the QR code to the reports. Yes, sir.
Going back to, is that report
Does it address some of those you might call sociological elements of difficulty of changing the culture of a large organization? Difficulty changing, again, I don't know exactly how it works, but if it's anything like the federal or state government, it's actually very difficult to hire people. And to
Yeah.
replace them, and
Yep.
to put visionaries in there and so on and so forth. I mean, does the report say anything about that?
Yes, and everything you've just said is true of the NHS. It's notoriously bad at taking up new technologies. So, that said, there are some things that we can implement fairly easily, we think, and that's what we focused on in the report was things like clinical trials. So if you want to do a clinical trial of a device in two hospitals that are down the street from each other, which we have those in London, right? And other cities as well. You have to go through completely separate approval processes. There's absolutely no reason for that, right? It's terrible. And implementing a new medical device in the healthcare system is similarly challenging. You have to go around to all the different healthcare trusts to get and make a completely new health economic case to them, and it's just so. Someone was explaining to me when I first came to the UK. So NHS stands for National Health System, National Health Service. Sorry, so it's not national. It's not really a health care system, and it's not a system. So it's other than that, yeah, it's great. I mean, if there's something seriously wrong with you, and you need treatment, you will get it. It'll be the best treatment available, and you won't owe a dime when you walk out the door. And there's a lot to be said for that. And people in the UK are very, very proud about this system. They're patriotic about this system the way Americans are patriotic about the army or about the military, around wartime or 9/11, it's really that sort of, really the core of the national psyche is this NHS system, and they're very proud of it. I mean, I should say we are very proud. I have 2 passports, so I can say we now. So if you have trouble getting at the reports, please email me. I think my email address is somewhere in here, or you can track me down easily. And I'll be glad to send those to you. If there are no more questions about this part, I'm gonna transition to talking about the company that I'm involved in right now. Okay? Right. So as has been explained, yeah.
Just because you're gonna shift gears.
Yeah.
For this group here, so when it comes to commercialization and helping startups, right? What resources are available? Like in the US, huge non-dilutive funding, SBIR, CTR, a lot of the department agencies are providing funds to make sure that these companies or technologies can be commercialized. Now there's still gaps, to raise your first Series A, however, but there is a lot of resources available. So in UK, if you're an entrepreneur, where do you, and this is where I think you can go later, but what kind of ecosystem is there for these companies?
It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So, what you would like ideally is the type of funding that gets you to a risk reducing milestone, and then the next one, and then the next one, and to the point where you've reduced the risk enough that a VC is or an angel or whoever can help you along, equity investment is going to get you somewhere. So there is VC in the UK, but it's not very V. That they're quite risk averse in the UK. So they typically only fund sure bets at later stages, unfortunately. And that's not just my experience, that's generally the view there. So there is sort of like an SBIR system in the UK. I've gotten funding from them, and it's great because they will fund not only the research and the development of the device, but they'll fund the business planning, they'll fund the patents, they'll fund lots of health economic study consultants, clinical trial design consultants. They'll really give you what you need to succeed. It's not much funding and the success rates are not great, but it exists. And there are some private foundations that, depending on the application you're working on, they can support you as well. Some of the like Wellcome Trust and some of the other charitable foundations actually want a chunk of the IP or a chunk of the company if you form one off the research that they fund, which I think is a bit sticky, but you know, it just kind of ends up as hair on the deal if it's not done, if it's not handled appropriately. But yeah, so there's and then the EU funding, you know, we have remained after a kind of a sabbatical, we have gotten back into the EU funding mechanisms. So, and then those are pretty good. So you can actually get pretty far on non-dilutive funding. And I think that's the government recognizing, look, you know, our VCs don't fund early stage stuff. So we need, if we're going to have this activity, we need to fund the early stage de-risking.
Yes, they do.
You know. Any other questions? Okay. So as Hubert mentioned earlier, I'm just gonna grab the prototypes while I'm talking. So I've done research on the lymphatic system for about 20 years now. And my scientific heart is very much fluid mechanical. So I've always loved fluid mechanics. And when I started working, I was doing cardiovascular work before, and I worked on stents, and which is what got me into the entrepreneurship space. And when I got into lymphatics, I thought, all right, well, what are the problems I can solve? Quickly came upon lymphedema. So 1 in 7 women get breast cancer. 20% of them will end up with a swollen arm as a result of their treatments. So the treatments are surgery. 95% of all breast cancer patients go for surgery within weeks of diagnosis. Radiation, chemotherapy, and both of which seem to increase the incidence and likelihood of lymphedema. So this is a terrible condition. It's incurable. There's really not much we can do for these patients other than help them manage the condition. So management of breast cancer related lymphedema involves 4 strategies. One is wearing compression bandages. Another one is exercise, right? Try and keep some of the lymph moving. Another one, you got to take care of your skin very well, because the lymphatic system is really important for immune function. And if you get an infection, cellulitis can be deadly, for example. And so you've got to watch out for that. And then if you live close enough to a physiotherapist that knows how to do it, lucky you can go for lymphatic massage or manual lymphatic drainage. And if you don't happen to live close enough to a physiotherapist that knows how to do that, well, sorry. And it's a pitiful state. And it's, as I'll come to later, it's under-recognized by the medical establishment for various reasons. It's, and even breast cancer surgeons some of them don't even bother warning the patient that they might get a swollen arm as a result of the treatments. And it can take years after surgery to develop. So you can imagine a breast cancer patient who wasn't warned about this. A couple of years later, the arm starts to swell, and they're like, what's going on with this? So maybe they go to their GP. And this is a story we've heard over and over again. Breast cancer survivor goes to GP with a swollen arm. The GP says, I think you're just getting fat. Can you imagine? It's a disgusting state of affairs. So we want to do something about this, and we know some fluid mechanics. So this is the device. You can see it here. I will trust you all.
These are the only devices you have left.
No, I have more back in the office, but
These are the ones that don't work.
Yeah.
so just kind of hand them back. Start some over here too. Here's one. So some of these are polyurethane, some of them are actually what we're going to use, which is medical grade silicone. And so I'll tell you about the design. So when lymphatic vessels are coming up the arm and they approach a lymph node, they split into multiple parallel pathways as they're approaching the lymph node. the reason for that is fluid mechanical is, and that is that lymphatic vessels do their own pumping. They're tiny little vessels under 1 millimeter in diameter. They cannot generate very much pressure, like a couple of centimeters of water pressure as they pump. And the lymph node is a centimeter or two across. It's a tightly packed, very tightly packed sponge, like porous medium, and it's a big resistor. So if you're designing a fluid circuit or an electrical circuit, how do you keep current or flow going? You split into multiple parallel pathways. Very cool design, right? So we took inspiration from that and designed this device that has 6 parallel pathways in it, and 2 suture tabs on the side that will keep it oriented with the flow direction. So when the breast cancer surgeon takes out the lymph node, they put one of these in, oriented in the right direction so that the fluid flow guides lymphatic vessel regrowth. And we have evidence in rats that that is actually what it does. And so we're very excited about this. Our next stage is, as you'll see, is to go into pigs, and then hopefully we get into humans before the IP runs out. So, so again, this is a terrible disease. Basically, what I've just told you, 20% of breast cancer patients get breast cancer related lymphedema, or BCRL. So it's I think this is an underestimate here. There's probably at least that many in the US with breast cancer related lymphedema. And in all developed countries, it's similar by population. So and you can see this is actually a pretty mild case of lymphedema here. I've seen much worse. And again, it's terrible. And I'll put this QR code up later. This is a video that we made that of patients describing what it's like to live with lymphedema. I'm actually going to show you a bit of the video later on. So conceptually, this is what happens. So you normally have about 30 lymph nodes under the arm. And what breast cancer surgeons typically do is they'll take out the tumor in the breast and they'll inject a bit of Evans blue dye around the tumor area, and just wait for a minute or two, see which lymph node turns blue, and pop that out and send it to histology and figure out if the cancer is spread into the lymph nodes, and perhaps take out more lymph nodes after that. So, and based on a meta-analysis that we've done of the literature, if they only take out one lymph node, so it's called sentinel lymph node biopsy, then the incidence of lymphedema is somewhere between 5 and 10%, which is still pretty bad, right? The next most common surgical complication is the need for repeat surgery. If you just look at like all surgical complications, that has an incidence of about 3%. And you just think about what's been done over the years to reduce the incidence of surgical complications and how successful those efforts have been. It's gotten the most common surgical complication in the world down to 3%. And this is at 5 or 10%. And you know, some breast cancer surgeons are declaring victory out of that. It's not great. So I think we can do much better. So when you cut this out, and when you cut the lymph node out, you've got severed vessels here, and they'll retract a little bit into the tissue. And so that's the concept is we put this implant in, point it in the right direction, and encourage lymphatic vessel regrowth. Probably takes between 3 and 6 months to regrow a lymphatic vessel. So and you can see how big it is there. There's evidence in the literature from other groups, not my lab, but other groups that have shown the importance of maintaining interstitial flow in regrowing lymphatic vessels. So there's more to this than just us thinking this is a neato idea. There's actually good evidence out there that it should work. Right. So these are the results. Yes.
Growth factors that could accelerate the.
Yeah. So sorry. Yeah. So we can encapsulate growth factors into the implant and release them locally.
Yeah.
That's a combination product, much longer regulatory pathway. So we hope the Bear device works. That's version 1.0, right? So we are looking at a version that incorporates 2 different lymphangiogenic factors. One is 9-cis-retinoic acid. So it's like a byproduct of processing vitamin A. And it's already approved in some forms for treatment of skin conditions. And so we can get a version of that we can incorporate into the implant and release from the implant. The other one is VEGF-C, which is more or less specific to lymphatic vessel regrowth. So it binds to VEGF-R3, but it also binds to VEGF-R2 and encourages blood vessel regrowth to a small degree. And giving something like that to a cancer patient scares a lot of people, justifiably.
Yeah.
So there's a group at Yale that has produced a lymphatic specific form of VEGF-C that only binds to VEGF-R3. And so that's we're working with that company to incorporate their drug into the device. And basically, and you kind of see it, the purple cloud here, that's the idea is we release it in about a 2 centimeter neighborhood around the implant to provide a therapeutic concentration in that 2 centimeter region around the implant for 90 days. And we think that'll be sufficient to regrow lymphatic vessels. Yeah. So that's version 3.0, 4.0 of the device. Maybe version 5.0 will be biodegradable. We get that question a lot because this is a permanent implant, obviously. And so the typical biodegradable polymers cause inflammation as they break down. I don't know if inflammation of that type is good for lymphatic vessel regrowth or bad for lymphatic vessel regrowth, and I don't want to find out until we've got something on the market already. Right. All right. Any other questions?
Jimmy, are you good? Oh, sorry.
Danny.
Oh, so like they like eventually merge each other.
Yeah, that's the idea, and this has been seen. There's a rat tail model of lymphedema. So the rat tail is, you got vertebrae running down the tail, and the artery and the vein run down inside the vertebrae. The lymphatic vessels run side by side along the outside. So if you cut like a donut out of a rat tail, you've severed the lymphatic vessels, but you maintain the blood circulation. So you're still producing lymph in the downstream part of the tail, and you can study lymphatic vessel regrowth in whatever you replace the donut with, like a collagen gel or something like that. And so people have looked at, what if you stop the flow, those vessels don't regrow, but if you maintain interstitial flow, they do grow. And those results are from Melody Schwartz's lab. She's at the University of Chicago. Fantastic researcher, by the way. And so that's the idea. No.
Are you gonna show us the rat data?
Yeah, it's in the next slide, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, so I was just curious if it ever plugs or if you get the outcome that you're hoping for, or you walk us through it.
We have had positive outcomes that show vessels have regrown through the implant or around the implant. I don't care if they grow around the implant or through the implant, as long as I get new vessels, right?
Yeah.
And so there are 2 different ways we've done that. One is indocyanine green, which is a fluorescent contrast medium that gets used for a few different applications. In a human, you would inject it in the finger web, and then you wait a few minutes and you can see at least the superficial lymphatics with the near infrared, right? In a rat, you just there's a lymph node like here in the rat, so we popped it out, put one of these in, and it's superficial enough that we could see with ICG, you can see the lymphatic vessel regrowth there. Yeah.
And have you done long term with infrared? How long?
Oh, these, I think we went 6 weeks or 8 weeks. It's not in the slide.
And the flow stayed relatively consistent.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, it works. And so.
Come on, John, you didn't consider forgiving.
Of course, I'll say it works. So the version we did in the rats was smaller than the one that's going around the room, and it's only got 3 parallel pathways, and it didn't have suture tabs on the side. And so we found that if they stayed oriented with the flow direction, they worked, but if they rotated out of the flow direction, they didn't work, like less than 10% success rate if they rotated out of the flow direction. That's why we put the suture tabs. Yeah. So these are the results of the rat study. I'll come to in a moment that there's another horrible surgical procedure that's done to try and cure lymphedema, where they take a lymph node from another part of the body and move it to the axilla. Someone had published a paper where they did that surgery on a rat. And they found a success rate of 53%, and ours was 55%. And so this is being done in humans now, partly based on this evidence. So, we're a lot less risky than that surgery. That's for reasons I'll tell you later. And if you don't do anything, then the vessels don't reconnect, right? So, yeah.
Just a general question about the design. So like, how did you determine the size of the diameter and size of the device itself and
So that is, all right, so the vessels, the lymphatic vessels in this region of the human are gonna be about 1 millimeter in diameter. That's the size of the holes, okay? We wanted this to be about half the size of a human lymph node. So a human lymph node is 1 or 2 centimeters across. This thing's 5 millimeters across, okay? Using injection molding, you cannot put the holes too close to each other. They need to be about 1 millimeter apart. You kind of, now you can build it up in your head and see why there are 6 parallel pathways in that thing that's 5 millimeters across.
thanks.
Yeah. I wish we had, so compared to like cardiovascular, there's zero research on lymphatics, right? It's such an understudied area. I wish we knew more about lymphatics so that we could design this thing on a more rational basis. And in terms of, guessing the time scale required to regrow the vessels, I said, we're gonna release drugs for 90 days. That's all like, there's no scientific basis for any of that other than kind of, the various papers that exist on lymphatic vessel regrowth, like the rat tail model.
I was just thinking about, we could get into this more later during the network kind of. By the way, we found where the food is. It's sitting over at Kaufman Union. So we're gonna go get it.
Yep.
Yep. So that's motivation to stick around.
Cool, all right.
Well, in addition to the excitement here. Is you brought up an interesting thing, because Jonathan's question about a combo device, it could potentially be better. And also kind of enhancing different kinds of optimization.
Yeah.
But then you also did mention about the patent running out. So it's just kind of like all these forces, right? Where you want to do something that's going to be really effective, but now you got to make all these like decisions to compromise because you got to get something out to patients to show that it can work, so you can get the funding to come on. So what if how did you go through that process, right? Because you know what I mean? Like it's a very kind of challenging decision you have to make.
Yeah, so being a stent guy, I'm kind of naturally following the pathway those two. So you had bare metal stents first, and then you had drug-eluting stents, 5-10 years later. And so I think the bare device that doesn't release any drugs needs to work well enough that we can get on the market and get some momentum going. So of course, it's going to be a class 3 device, right? The PMA, there's some possibility we might be able to get breakthrough, but I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But anyway, I'm hoping we can keep our trial data confidential and use that as and sort of effectively extend the life of the in that way. And honestly, it's it's a big problem, but there's not a lot of attention being given to it. So I don't, other than the people that I know in the field, most of whom are trying to develop, drugs for this. And then there's some devices, with the lymphovenous anastomosis, which come back to in a minute. It's a surgical procedure. So there are not that many people trying to do a similar thing in terms of prevention. So I think we'll be okay. I'm not too worried about the expiration of the patent. It's another 9 years away. Yes.
Going back to the device, so you mentioned that it is permanent, so you don't really have secondary surgery to do anything once the cells grow.
That's right. That's an important feature, actually, is that we have minimal intrusion on the standard care pathway. It takes minutes to sew this thing in, and that's all that's done. You don't go back in and take it out. You leave it in.
Yeah, I'm also curious, do you see any inflammatory response just because of the device itself?
Medical grade silicone, you know, it's a material that's been around for decades, right? And, we don't think 5% encapsulation will be a problem given the size of this thing. So I think we'll be okay. You know, not gone. So, right. Any other questions?
Could you just talk through the you know, highly invasive alternative, just so we.
I'll come back to that. Yeah. I've got a whole slide on competition. So what are we bringing? So stakeholder values, well, patients, it'll improve their quality of life. My dream is that no breast cancer patient ever even hears of lymphedema ever again. Right? Think about what they've been through already. The diagnosis, horrible, disfiguring, terrible surgery in some cases. It's not nice to have their arms swell up afterwards. And we want this to be available everywhere they're doing cancer surgeries, which I think we can do. Some of the other solutions out there, as you'll see, are just really not scalable. And positive effect on family. One of the patients that works with us and advises us on this research has a graded compression device. So it's a pneumatic device that squeezes like this, going up the arm. And she does this for about half an hour a day and seems to help her. Great, right? But it's kind of loud. I turn on this pneumatic pump and it you know, right? And she sat down one day and put it on and, you know, got a book to read or something. And she looked over at her son, and her son, who's a teenager, was really upset. And she said, "What's wrong? You know, but it looks like you're upset about something." He says, "I hate the sound of that machine. It reminds me of breast cancer." Oh. And so it you know, it's and to the patients, it's a constant reminder they have breast cancer. You know, you want these people to just go on and live their lives and get back to being normal and, you know, some content at least. With surgeons, well, we don't ask them to retrain. We don't ask them to learn any new techniques. We tell them, teach them in 5 minutes to point it in the right direction, and every surgeon knows how to tie sutures. So we think this is quite scalable, minimal intrusion on the standard care pathway, as I mentioned earlier. And so we think that that'll increase job satisfaction for them. Healthcare providers. Okay. For a breast cancer patient with a swollen arm, compared to a breast cancer patient who went through the same treatments and did not get a swollen arm, it costs $5,000 to $10,000 per year to take care of that patient with these, you know, the management with the 4 strategies, right? The compression bandages, they cost money. Some healthcare systems pay for those, some don't. So, you know, in terms of total cost to a healthcare system, if they're providing if they're doing the right thing and providing management, it's costing $5,000 to $10,000 per year. Every year for the rest of that patient's life. 10-year survival rates, breast cancer are up around 80%, 85%. So that's a lot of people living for a long time with a swollen arm. And it's a very expensive proposition to do that. So with our implant, you know, and again, this is a rough estimate. We think we will charge $3,000 per patient for the device. And if the clinician wants to put in more than one device, we'll just charge per patient. The reason we can do that, this is injection molded. Medical grade silicone is fairly cheap. We're putting in like under a microgram of drug. If we put any drug in it, the manufacturing cost is under $10. That is not what determines the price of the device, which is often the case for MedTech, as you all know. So the value we bring to the healthcare system is sort of, you want to be in that sweet zone of providing clear savings, but still being able to support the development of device and presenting a significant enough market opportunity for one of the big companies to take it up. Right. So we think we're quite good on healthcare economics, and so hopefully that'll ease implementation for us. So with that $3,000 price in the areas where we have intellectual property protection, that totals up to about $3 billion a year market. Pretty decent size, right? This is the unfortunate consequence of, or fortunate of the unfortunate number that, breast cancer is very common, right? There are other cancers where they take out lymph nodes, so melanoma, incidence is about the same of lymphedema. John McCain, senator, had melanoma and he had lymphedema in his neck from treatment. Head and neck cancers, the incidence of lymphedema in those patients is about like 80%. So almost all of it did. It's pretty terrible. Pelvic cancers, you get lymphedema in the legs, and other cancers. So totaling up all of these other cancers, if we get indications for all the other cancers as well, it'll double this number. Right, so breast cancer is half the market. That's why we're going after it first. Makes sense, right? So, okay.
Jimmy, another kind of complex question though is, that can be market, but is the healthcare system able to sustain that kind of, when new healthcare, like I'll give you an example, like cochlear implants, it's only 5% penetration into the market. And there's limitations as to how many cochlear implants you can actually do at some clinics and how much accessibility and covered for it. So even though the market is there, right, the system has to be able to support the cost.
Yeah.
And the question is whether there's enough funds that it would be able to support, right? I don't know. But
Yeah. So this is
Yeah.
the key word, right?
Yeah.
This is as big as it could be.
Yeah.
It'll certainly be smaller, and your personality type will do the calculation on how much it's actually going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I fully recognize that's, it'll be a smaller number than it's still a big number.
Yeah, it's still a big number.
Yeah. Yes.
To people understand this costing part of it, when you compare your device versus the next device, there's two colors in that. One clear what the color means. Second is to come in with 3,000 to do the procedure cost as well, including the surgeon and hospital and other costs.
It's being done during the breast cancer surgery, so the breast cancer surgery is already paid for in some sense by, treating cancer. But we're adding about 5 minutes onto that procedure. So there's no additional cost involved in the surgery in deploying the device.
We need to see other incentive for healthcare provider consulting that because they will competition money, which they are willing. When we come to the hospital, like we are just adding to that.
Yeah.
All ecosystem and incentive alignment with market.
It'll certainly depend on whether or not the healthcare system that would need to pay for the device is also responsible for the care of the patient with the swollen arm afterwards, right? So if those are two different insurance companies, we might be solving, but it's also, you could also look at it as minimizing surgical complications, which generally hospitals want to do. And also there's a really strong patient advocacy group called the Lymphatic Education and Research Network. The spokesperson is Kathy Bates, the actor. She has lymphedema in both arms from breast cancer. And so I think with some patient advocacy, patient education, stakeholder engagement, I think we can, we can work with providers and payers to help spread the solution. But yeah, there's certainly going to be limitations if it's a siloed support system. Yes.
Well, I will give you one more comment about this, I'm a surgeon.
Yeah.
And actually, the latest guidelines for breast cancer surgery, there's a little different. So they quite rarely do the lymph node dissection. They mostly do sentinel lymph node dissection. So they remove from lymph node.
Yeah.
So the problem of lymphedema is growing with the past.
It's not going away. Even for sentinel lymph node biopsy, as I was saying earlier, the incidence is between 5 and 10%. Right. So that's not quite rare compared to other surgical complications.
They remain probably silly. Now they change the very.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there is a migration towards sentinel lymph node biopsy, but that's not getting rid of the problem.
Just
yeah.
In terms of market will be
sure.
You interfaced with like professional societies to get you sort of want guidelines and things, because if there's only this as a real tangible option for undergoing the surgery, I'd imagine they would jump on this. And then if you've got the ESMO into the guidelines, the NHS would be mandated to.
You still gotta convince down to the street level to implement things in the NHS, so that's one of the limitations I was referring to earlier. Yeah, I mean, we've engaged with breast cancer surgeons and lymphatic surgeons, and generally the response to this has been very good, mainly because of the minimal intrusion on the care pathway. That no need for retraining and so. Yeah. Okay. There we go. All right, so here's the competition. So here's us on the left. I'm going to start with here. So this is autologous lymph node transfer. So this is a surgical procedure taking several hours. It's not used as prevention. It's only used as treatment. So what they do is they remove a lymph node and its surrounding tissue, typically from the groin, and they move it up to the axilla. And it involves microsurgery because they have to reconnect the blood vessels that supply that lymph node. Otherwise, it would just be dead tissue. So they don't surgically reconnect lymphatic vessels. They, like us, rely on the reconnection of the lymphatic vessels and finding each other and reconnecting, right? So we're conceptually similar to this, but at much lower risk, because removing the lymph node from the groin is about 25% risk of giving a lymphedema in the leg. Horrible. Okay. You're thinking, this is nuts. Why would anybody do this? Well, it's an indication of how desperate patients are for a solution to this problem, really. Most healthcare systems won't cover this. So there are patients who take second mortgages on their house, they crowdfund, they do whatever they can because they're so desperate for a solution. And that's really why this is still even in the table, is there's just not much out there, right? Quite costly, as you can see, and not scalable. You need to be near a pretty major center to have that done. BioBridge is a device that's being developed by a company in the Bay Area, California, and it's collagen fibers that are injected subcutaneously in the shoulder. And this is done with a device that sits on the shoulder. It's expensive, requires additional training. It's not a scalable solution. It's not great, and it's we don't know what it's going to cost, but it takes a lot of time, and it works on the principle of wicking fluid out of the arm. But I mean, wicking fluid, it requires two fluids like air and water, right? And once the whole thing is wet, I don't see how it works. I mean, if it works, I'm happy for those guys, and I'm happy for the patients that can benefit from it. But I'm not optimistic for that.
Is that one already in moving to human studies?
It's in clinical trials.
It's in clinical trials now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. LVA, lymphovenous anastomosis. So this is what it sounds like. You find a lymphatic vessel, you find a nearby vein, and you anastomose the lymphatic vessel to the vein. So that is done as a treatment. It's an additional surgical procedure. It's quite expensive. It's not scalable. It requires microsurgery. These vessels are under 1 millimeter in diameter, and the anastomotic procedure is quite tedious. So there are some surgeons that are getting better at this, and maybe they claim they can do it faster, but still, it's not a scalable solution. The data are kind of mixed. There's not been a general clinical trial, you might say, of this. It's a surgical solution. If it had to go through the same rigor as a medical device, I don't think it would be reimbursed. So it's but it seems maybe to help some patients, but not others. And the success rate is not really known. As far as I know, I've not seen any good literature on that convinced me that this works. Lympha is LVA done at the time of breast cancer surgery. So this is the only other preventative technology that we're aware of. And again, as they're doing the surgery, they would anastomose the lymphatic vessels to a nearby vein and just try and bypass the rest of the lymphatic system. So done as prevention, when it's added on to breast cancer surgery, adds 30 minutes at least, probably an hour and a half. So that's expensive and an intrusion on the system, and generally has to be done by a microsurgeon. So the breast cancer surgeon would be doing their job, and they would have to stop and let the microsurgeon come in and do the anastomosis, and then the breast cancer surgeon starts up again, and it's quite expensive, and it's probably more scalable in this form than it is as a treatment, but still, I think it's going to have scalability issues. Furthermore, the success rate of Lympha early on, it seems to reduce incidence of lymphedema, but I've now the long-term data out more than 2 years don't look so good. So that's a story that remains to be told, whether or not Lympha is going to be even successful in the limited number of places where it's being done. But I don't see it bringing down costs of this, but there's some nice new technologies that maybe will help out with that. And then us, well, we're deployable in medicine, cost a lot less and easily integrated into the standard care pathway. So I think we have some nice advantages. The team was myself, 2 postdocs, a CEO. Paul Tiruchelvam is a breast cancer surgeon at Imperial College. Great guy, he's been helping us a lot. And these are the patients that advise us on our research. You can see them wearing their compression bandages, 2 of them at least, and they're holding the prototypes that are going around the room. So we have to acknowledge the bravery that they have to come in and talk about this horrible disease with us, and we're very thankful for them and their efforts. So when we pitch this is sort of why I invest, and is sort of summarizing the things that I've told you so far. Now, where are we? Well, we're kind of at this stage. We've had about 2 million in funding to date in grant money and founder money. So that's been useful, getting us to the point where we have a regulatory compliant ISO 13485 quality management system to design and manufacture the things that are going around the tables. Great, right? We got the rat data, but we need to go into pigs. Pigs are expensive, certainly, but the most expensive thing for us is that we have to house the pigs for 3 months after the surgery to see whether or not the lymphatic vessels have regrown. And that's expensive. I don't know what the most expensive hotel in Minneapolis is, but but that's the nightly rate that we're talking about, really. So that's where we're stuck, actually, is raising enough money to get into the pigs. And so we've got some possibilities that we're working on. We're not giving up, chipping away at it and doing what we can. So I thought I would share some of the feedback that we've gotten from VCs and grant reviewers and so forth, just to give you an idea of how challenging it is to try and do this. I mean, you're all aware of how difficult MedTech is in general, but I think you can see what we're up against here is we're pointing out to surgeons that they're creating problems. Surgeons don't like to hear that, right? This is a women's health issue, which is generally not as important to society, and the medical establishment, and that it's not great, right? And it's something that happens. It can usually happens between 2 and 3 years after surgery, and it's just hard to get attention for this. The lymphatic system is largely ignored. I mean, we got a lot of challenges here. All right, so here's what we heard from VCs. Hey, it looks great. We only invest in things that are about to go to market. So good luck. Checked with a few people looking for a lead. That's you could read whatever you want to into that statement. That's just kind of a gentler way of saying, hell no, go away. And then this was from the one that we got the closest with. Like, we met with these guys probably 4 or 5 times. They had asked for our data room and we got really deep with them and they said, sorry, this is just not right for us. We're a small new VC and we need quick wins. So fair enough, right? I mean, these are the kind of things that probably all of you have heard in your ventures as well. Here's one. Okay, so relative to the point that our surgeon friend brought up back there, there's this impression that lymphedema is a disappearing problem. Okay, so we always say about 20%. And because that's what the literature says, not what we say, it's what the literature says. But there's this impression that you know, it's practically disappearing and it's only about 5 to 8%, this guy says, overall. So here are the data, and this is from a meta-analysis that we've done. So SLNB is sentinel lymph node biopsy. That's all of these numbers here. It's between 5 and 10%. I don't even know why we put this 0.6 on here. It's not that accurate a number. And then if you're undergoing axillary lymph node dissection, which is sort of taking out more than one lymph node, typically more than 2 or 3, right? And you can see that that comes to about 23%. So this is plus some additional surgical treatment, plus some additional non-surgical treatment, namely radiation and chemo. Okay. So others have shown that this increases the incidence that radiation chemo. We didn't find it in ours because we're looking at a very broad spectrum of papers in the literature for this meta-analysis. And so 6% here, 23% here. So the overall incidence of lymphedema is still, we calculated between 15 and 20%. Then I'll show you in the next slide why we can't be any more accurate than that. Really, what determines the incidence of lymphedema in a particular hospital is going to be how many of these procedures do they do versus how many of these they do. It's 2 separate numbers that have to be treated separately. And talking about an overall incidence rate is actually kind of foolish because it's going to depend in the healthcare system, you know, again, how many procedures of each type they're doing. Right. More on incidence. Okay, so this is lymphedema incidence from all of these studies based on the criteria used to determine whether or not a patient has lymphedema. Measuring the volume of the arm is not trivial. It's difficult to do in a repeatable fashion with any sort of accuracy. So if you use a volume increase of 5%, you find an overall incidence of about 27% with a big error bar on it. And if you use more than 10% increase in volume, then it's again around 20%. And if you use an absolute number of 20 cubic centimeters, then it's up around 25% or so. But look at these error bars, right? And that's because it's a crappy measurement. And the main problem is where do you cut off at the shoulder? And if you miss the cutoff by a centimeter or 2, you'll produce a 5 or 10% increase in volume. So it's actually difficult to talk about an incidence rate with any degree of accuracy. And then this one is circumference of the arm used as the criteria. I mean, it's horrible. And 10, 15 years ago, there was a big paper published like, we got to do better at criteria for diagnosing lymphedema. And here is our list of criteria that everyone must use from now on. And nobody uses it. So this is still a problem. All right. Feedback from proposal reviewers, more than that. And then this is kind of the same thing. It's not a big problem. It's going away. So this amounts to around 500 patients per year in the NHS. Okay. 500 patients per year. Let's go to the NHS website and see how many people are suffering from lymphedema in the UK. Doesn't take long. There are 200,000 patients suffering from lymphedema in the UK, And at 500 patients per year, that's 400 years of accumulating patients with none of them dying. This is not an accurate number. This is from a self-proclaimed leading breast cancer surgeon. So we got a serious perception problem here. Okay, exercise, diet, ketoprofen are simpler and cheaper options since all these patients are overweight and obese. Like, who cares? What's the point of this? This is not useful, right? And ketoprofen got stopped, but severity of the condition is often quite mild. I'm going to come back to this. All right, and then some the usual kind of stupidities that researchers are used to. We were proposing to have money to gather evidence that it works in pigs. There's no evidence that it works. I'm sure you've had similar comments to your proposals. It will be difficult to remove the implant. We didn't say anything about removing it. There are other cures in lymphedema in development. None that work so far. I just don't think it'll work.
That's the best one.
That's the best one, yeah. And this is following a two-stage process. They could have said this at stage 1 and saved us the trouble of writing the massive proposal at stage 2. That drove me nuts. Giving large amounts of growth factors to cancer patients is dangerous. That's true if that's what we were doing, but that's not what we're doing. We're giving tiny amounts in a locally released manner. So yeah, the biopharma people have trouble getting their head around locally released drugs. So, all right, let's come back to this. Severity of the condition is often quite mild, and AV guy, I'm hoping this is where the speakers will work.
The night before having my surgery, when I saw the breast cancer nurse, I sat there and I cried because I'd done some research on lymphedema. And it was like, oh, it happens, but don't worry about it. You know, you'll get a sleeve and everything will be fine.
All along the way, everyone's telling me nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about.
2 years into all this, I felt that one arm was slightly tighter than the other.
My left arm was swollen like an elephant's trunk. It was huge.
I was just totally shocked. I thought, what is this?
I started thinking, that's it, I've got lymphedema.
I was actually very upset because I'm a cellist and I need my arm working, to play my cello. I can play it for 10 or 15 minutes or something, but then I have to stop.
I'm anxious, I'm scared, and I'm just obsessed with doing everything right to keep my lymphedema down.
Bad enough you get the cancer, and then the side effects that comes with it, then you've got lymphedema, which is irreversible and incurable.
I'm living in hope that I'm going to be able to do something about it, but at the same time I'm also living in fear that it's going to get worse.
And the emotional impact is just absolutely horrendous. Because you have this constant reminder that you had breast cancer and the amount of work that you have to do to keep it down.
It chips away at your confidence and it chips away at your self-image.
I want people to be aware of, first and foremost, that there is such a thing as lymphedema.
You need to tell patients to be aware of it and tell them what the warning signs are.
I'm angry and I feel quite alone.
I'm terminally ill, I've got lymphedema, and the struggles going on inside my body and the pain I'm in, you don't see.
It's up to me to look after this fat, heavy arm that I carry with me.
It's just hard, day to day.
Good thing about being a performer, I just push it out of my mind. That's how I deal with it. And then other times when I'm a bit stronger, I do something about it.
You wear this sleeve to try your best to stop it from getting worse, and you do the exercises, but it's a constant ache, constant pain. To be honest, it's a bit of a nightmare, but you just try and get on with it, really.
And we got the comment, the condition is often quite mild. It was in a grant program where we were allowed to rebut what the reviewer said. So we pointed out that you don't accumulate lymphedema patients over 400 years, you know, and I was allowed to bring 2 people with me to the interview. So I brought a breast cancer surgeon, Paul Tirchowum, I showed him in the slide earlier, and one of these patients. And she held up her arm. She's like, "Don't tell me this is mild," right? And we got the funding.
Yes.
So persistence maybe pays, but problem solving is what drives me, and that this is a problem. Right. MedTech gets less recognition in biopharma, certainly in the UK. I'm interested to hear your perspectives here. But is that a weakness for MedTech in the UK, or is that an opportunity? I prefer to see it as an opportunity. You know, we've got a great contribution to the UK economy already, and the potential to grow with all those SMEs generating that long tail of economic benefit. And it's very exciting right now to be able to have the opportunity to influence governmental policy. And Lord Sainsbury's got us. I've been to meetings in the House of Lords and with MPs, and it's very exciting to have that potential for that kind of impact on MedTech going forward. So I love the opportunity. There's much appetite for risk in the UK. I think as I explained earlier with the VCs. I think you're lucky to be. This is really top 3 in the world in MedTech environment here in the Minneapolis area. You're very lucky to be here. And lastly, I'm very lucky to be visiting you. And thank you for your attention today.